On Thursday, 6 Republican-led states sued Biden to block his student loan forgiveness. Prior to that, there was a right-wing organization. I'm trying to think of what the name of it was. I don't know if it wasn't quite the Federalist Society. It was a right-wing organization that had brought suit on behalf of one of the people working there. And the guy did not want to be forced to have his student loan debt forgiven because he might incur a tax liability associated with it from his state. And, you know, this is just a way for them to sink the loan. I mean, it was not necessarily the most, it was disingenuous. I mean,
well, it'll put him in a different tax bracket. Obviously, it's the same strategy they did with and are doing still with the ACA.
It's pretty funny, though, what ultimately happened. The Biden administration, again, there are 2 suits. The Biden administration and the DOJ basically said, okay, we are both making it optional now. You can opt out of debt forgiveness. Even though we're doing it automatically for people, you're allowed to opt out if you want. And then they personally canceled his debt forgiveness. And so that because he was suing for it, the DOJ just went in and they said, okay, we will not forgive your debt. And the reason why they had to find this guy to do it was because they have a problem with standing, which, just to remind people, means if you're going to sue because of damages, you need to be the person who is suffering those damages. And if you're not party to the suit. And because he has the opportunity to either opt out, and now because he himself is not getting student loan debt forgiveness, he has no standing, and that case is not going to move forward. The diminishment of the number of people, which was announced, I guess, today or yesterday, who are eligible for student debt relief, is in many respects the same issue. These 6 Republican attorney generals brought the suit in part because they have some type of relationship with some private entities who administer federal student loans. The states argue that they have like relationships. Maybe they've invested in some of these. Maybe their pension funds are in with these private companies. And the Biden administration had basically said, if you have those federal, those privately held federal loans, you can consolidate all of this into a federal loan, and then we'll give you the debt forgiveness. Because you don't have the ability necessarily to forgive a private loan,
right? Because
you don't hold the note. But if you invite people to mix your privately held loan with a publicly held loan, consolidate those loans, then they can give you the debt relief that would apply to that. In Missouri, Attorney General Eric Schmidt argued that the Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority, which is like a quasi-state entity, owns and services federally guaranteed student loans. They will face economic harm from the debt relief program.
Oh, poor baby.
In Nebraska, some of the pension fund is in one of these private services. And so the Biden administration had a choice, which was to allow this suit to continue and perhaps either delay, certainly I imagine delay, but completely undercut the ability of the administration to provide student debt relief to 45 million Americans. They basically made the decision to cordon off those people who are in that situation where they have private loans that are serviced by private entities, and basically say you cannot consolidate them going forward. And by the administration count, like the cohort of people who exist in there is being reported as about 3 to 4 million people. So it would reduce the number of people who are getting student loan debt relief by 3 or 4 million people. However, apparently within that cohort, like 1.5 million of them have other federally owned student loans, which they will get the debt relief on there. And 1.6 million borrowers will have, those are the direct loans. Another 1.5 have a certain type of privately held federal loan, an FFEL consolidation loan. Theirs would have been very difficult to relieve anyways. So according to the administration, there's 770,000 borrowers who are going to be directly affected, and they are going to lose their loan forgiveness because of this Republican lawsuit, or at least the Biden administration's response to it. Frankly, I mean, I would imagine the lawyers in the Biden administration have figured out this is the best way to preserve the loan relief for 41, 42 million Americans. The Department of Education has said we're going to try and figure out a way to get around this in the meantime. But, you know, the way that it's being reported that the Biden administration is shrinking this, they are doing it to protect 41, 42 million people's debt relief. Maybe 44 million. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how it's counted in this instance. But make no mistake about it. This is the Republican Party actively undercutting this proposal on purpose. And the way that's being reported is ridiculous. You know, they should also report that this one guy is not getting a student loan debt relief because he was suing the government because he wanted to prevent other people from having student debt relief.
He pulled himself up by his bootstraps. He's got amazing bootstraps. So basically, cutting off 700,000 people to help 4 million other people who have a combo of public and privately held loans. So, and it's being reported as I've seen it reported as it's halted, and that if you requested relief up until this point, that's good. But if you haven't yet, it might be stalled.
Yes. If you have one of those FFEL loans up until the 29th of September, you could have consolidated. If you didn't consolidate since then, you won't be able to going forward. And this, again, is an attempt to prevent these plaintiffs from having standing. Because if going forward, I mean, look, you can consolidate loans. People do that all the time. If you going forward, the argument would be made by these states that you're going to do irreparable harm to us economically because they filed yesterday. So going forward, they'll have no standing since they filed because you won't be able to do that anymore. And it really is just simply a way to prevent these Republicans from tanking the entire debt relief program. And I'm reading some people are saying, like, this is exactly what Joe Biden wanted. It's just absurd. The idea that they're like, well, if we do this plan where we forgive the student debt of 42 million people, what we ultimately are going to be able to do is not give it to 770,000. And that's going to help us politically or with all our benefactors. It's absurd. It really is absurd. I suppose there could be tort lawyers who know more about civil procedure than I do, who could say, that's not what I would have done to avoid tanking this whole proposal. I would have filed a blankety blank motion I haven't seen anybody write that. I suppose it's possible, but any other explanation is just absurd.
Sam, I missed this earlier when I stepped away, but I just so
it was in depth. It was comprehensive.
I just am curious. So your assessment is that this kind of sacrificial lamb of the private student loan servicers, or the private student loans, I should say, is a way to stave off like these lawsuits, because then if those aren't included, that there's nobody who has been harmed by their standard, and there's no one who has standing. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And they did this, and again, there was two different cases. One was filed by an individual who works for a right-wing think tank who was complaining that he'd be liable for income tax in his state for having this. And they basically said, okay, we're going to now make it, you have an opt-out option. If you don't want your federal loan relieved, you can opt out because it's automatic for people. And two, we're going to personally make sure that yours is not relieved. Right. And so I hope that think tank is going to give him a raise to cover that lack of student debt relief. And then the second one was brought yesterday by these 6 attorney general, Republican attorney generals. And that's the one where they basically said, we're no longer allowing the consolidation of loans, which would have provided you with the debt forgiveness for, arguably, according to the administration, about nearly 800,000 people. And they're going to work on some other way of figuring that out. But that's the plan.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's the same thing, why we can't have anything nice in this country, because we're constantly beholden to people who are missing out on profit because you decided to help people. And, it'll happen if we ever get a piece. I mean, look at the ACA, but if we ever get some amount of a single payer system, either on a statewide level or on a federal level, you're going to see people suing because of their lost profits. I know that's not exactly what's happening, but that is, I remember when I interviewed Sanders for an MSNBC thing a while ago, I was told to ask him, and I was like, God damn, I don't want to ask him this. But what about people who are invested in the private health insurance industry? And I'm like, well, they can go fuck off into the night. Sorry. But no, that's what but I had to ask, and he just didn't, it was such a non-issue. It's like, yeah, okay. Also, everyone has health care. What about the cost benefit of that? And then I asked about what about people who work in the industry? Well, they can help work and run a single payer program. Of
course. Yeah. Most of those people are, at least the people who are working, on the adjusting would be hired to administer the program.
Right.
A lot of these private companies probably would be hired to administer the program. I mean, in and of themselves, they would just become servicers in many respects. And you just got to make sure they're not getting, the fees that you would on a loan situation. But that's the way it works. F the Packers. I'm sorry, Sam, but it's attorneys general, not attorney generals.
I knew someone would say that.
I'm literally shaking and crying. Please don't make this mistake again.
It's the most upsetting plural noun ever. Just, so weird.
But it is infuriating to see the way that this is being reported, because the headline should be Republicans successfully stop student debt loan forgiveness for nearly 800,000 people by suing the Biden administration. That's what should be going on here. Unless, and I am open to the analysis of an attorney who works in this field, that there was some other remedy to stave off the potential of getting a Republican judge or something who's going to enjoin the whole program. But I until I hear that person, I think that's the way this should be reported, and it's not being reported that way. It is obscuring who's got what agenda and how it's working.